Hey, everybody, and welcome to a special Behind the Stays podcast series on the future of travel. Over the next few episodes, you'll get access to exclusive conversations that were recorded live in Austin, Texas at Expedia Group's Explore Connect, a gathering that brought together some of the most powerful voices in travel tech alongside the top owners and operators of vacation rental management companies from around the world. I sat down with several of Expedia's most influential leaders at this event. These are the folks that are guiding brands like Expedia, Hotels.com, and Vrbo to unpack how they're reimagining discovery, booking, and experience in an AI-powered travel world. In this first conversation, I chat with Larry Plawsky, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Vrbo. And get this was actually Larry's first ever podcast interview, so it was extra special. Larry's a brand builder who spent his career rooting for the underdog, from helping revive Old Spice back in the day to scaling massive two-sided marketplaces like Ticketmaster, and now he's leading Vrbo into its next chapter within the Expedia Group ecosystem. In this episode, we dive into how Vrbo plans to take on Airbnb by doubling down on trust and quality, not just scale, the single biggest opportunity Larry sees to increase traveler confidence when booking a home, how Expedia's integrated network of brands, from Hotels.com to OneKey, gives Vrbo a unique competitive advantage, and how AI is already reshaping discovery on Vrbo, from smart sorting and review summaries to a vision of what travel planning could look like when chat-based search meets marketplace precision. Larry is thoughtful, humble, and smart, a rare mix of brand soul and analytical rigor. And in this conversation, you'll hear exactly how one of the most iconic names in alternative accommodations plans to redefine trust and loyalty in the years ahead. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Larry, SVP and General Manager of Vrbo. Well, Larry, I understand that this is the first time you've been on a podcast.
This is true.
And I just think that that's like such a treat for me to be to break, you into the podcast ecosystem and sphere. It's an exciting place. It can be a little scary sometimes, but mostly really exciting. So thank you for making time to chat with me today.
My pleasure to be here.
Well, there's so much I want to talk to you about, Larry, but one of my favorite questions to ask folks that come on the show is, if I were to crash a happy hour with you and the people that know you best, your friends from school, from elementary school, your family, your colleagues now, whoever you think knows you best, and if I were to ask them to tell me a story about Larry, is there a story you think that they might immediately tell me? And if so, what is that story?
Well, I'd say that in general, no one I work with will or should ever meet anyone I grew up with, because no good could ever come from that. I got married a little bit later in life, and I'm somewhat convinced it's because I introduced my girlfriends to my friends, and it just never really worked out. So I don't think I'd ever do that per se or allow you to crash, but if my friends were with my mom, for instance, these are the friends I grew up with, so they had to be generous, they had to be charitable. Maybe they would say something like this. So I grew up in New York. And, you've got the New York Yankees. They've won 27 World Series championships. I think that's the number. I'm a Mets fan. The Giants, right? Storied NFL franchise. I'm a Jets fan. And when the Islanders were winning Stanley Cups, I was a Rangers fan. So I think what that really says is I root for the underdogs. I've always been someone who supports the underdogs, even some of my professional decisions I've made about working for challenger businesses and brands. But I think it's about being the underdog. That's the safest answer I can probably give you that's fit for anyone else's consumption.
That's a great answer. That might be one of my favorite answers I've ever heard on the show. That's wonderful. So a contrarian at heart. Growing up, did you like to argue a lot?
No, I don't think I did. I mean, I probably argued with I have an older sister, so I probably argued with her pretty regularly. But I tried to be the favorite son. So I tried to be really good and acquiesce to my parents as much as possible. So I don't think I was the arguer, even though I might be a contrarian. I'd probably left that arguing with my friends. Yeah.
You have done a lot of incredible work with a number of well-known brands, mostly in the marketplace space, which we'll get into in a minute here. But I'm always curious to talk to folks who have spent a lot of time helping build brands, helping scale brands. about sort of their own creative interests and maybe what initially inspired them to care about brand, let alone help build brands. Were you creative as a child? At what point in time did you think that you wanted to work in helping not just start but build and ultimately scale brands? Where does that desire come from?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I after college, I worked in investment banking for several years. So no one thinks of investment bankers as brand builders. And I had a really good experience. It was very quantitative. It was very rigorous, and I enjoyed the work. But I just always wanted experience to learn how to. I wanted to learn how to run a business. That was the experience that I wanted. And so I was back at graduate school. I was at Northwestern, and I had an opportunity to intern at Procter & Gamble. And I went there because I wanted to learn how to run a business. That was this great academy for running a business. But over time, what I learned was the value of the brand, and I kind of got very excited. I went there full time, and I got very excited about building brands. I got passionate about building brands, and it wasn't something I thought about or intended to do. It's something I kind of fell into, I think. And what was really interesting in my experience at P&G, they always taught us about what is the most important need to your customer, to your consumer. What are the most important unmet needs to your consumers? How can you deliver them better than anyone else can? It wasn't just about a marketing message. It wasn't just about a marketing campaign. It was about developing superior products that were noticeable to the consumer. And so it was a combination of product. It was a combination with marketing. And that set me on a career of building brands. And it's been fun ever since. And thankfully, fortunately, I've been successful doing it.
Were there any projects or brands specifically at Procter & Gamble that you got to work on that were interesting, that brought you joy, obviously, but that we might know?
Yeah, so Procter & Gamble is a huge business that has a lot of power brands like Tide and Pampers and Crest. And I did not work on one of those businesses. I didn't work on a market leader. I worked on a major challenge. I worked on Old Spice, right? So Old Spice deodorant, that's your grandfather's product, your father's product, maybe your great-grandfather's product, right? It wasn't anyone young was using. And it certainly wasn't the leader in the category. And it was one of the few brands in the company that was marketed to men as opposed to women either. So that was just a fun place to play and to innovate. When I joined, we were the number 10 brand in the category. I think by the time I left, we were the number 3 brand. But it was all about delivering something for the consumer that they weren't getting with other brands and other businesses, with other deodorant products. So our focus, and this sounds kind of strange to talk about when we're talking about vacation rentals, but our focus was on building better wetness protection, right? So not something that's super glamorous or super sexy, but we created products that were superior to anything else in the industry, and they were consumer noticeable. Travelers said, hey, I sweat a lot. Not travelers. Consumers said that I sweat a lot, and we created a product that was much better for them than anything else in the market. But we couldn't go out and market to them like, hey, you sweat a lot. Use this product. Use Red Zone. So we talked about their active lifestyle, and we presented their active lifestyle. And the reason they sweat is because they're so active. And we developed the right advertising, the right product, the right packaging. We put it all together, and it put the business on a really great trajectory.
Well, either I'm my father or grandfather or great-grandfather, or you were successful, because growing up, I remember when I was in early high school, Old Spice was like the rage again. I mean, that's what was cool. That's what we were all using. I'm a loyal consumer of the product to this day. Were you doing what was his name? The guy that was like on the horse?
This was way before the horse.
Okay,
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
This is way before the horse. It was we had a campaign, 1-800-PROVE-IT. You don't think it's the best, right?
Yes.
But we also did a lot of. So I'm glad that you said that you used it, because we had all of these programs that were dedicated towards teenage boys. So in 5th grade class, there'd be a curriculum-based program about hygiene, and we give out a sample of high-endurance deodorant. And then 8th grade, when kids would go into the locker rooms, they get a sample of high-endurance. So we were very focused on reaching teens, and I think we're the number 1 brand among teens. So it was a great example of a challenger, over time, becoming a leader in a category.
Wow, that's amazing. I have so many more questions there, but I will move on since we could talk about deodorant all day, but that's not why we're here.
Right.
So then you move into marketplaces, and you have recently spent nearly a decade at Ticketmaster. I'd love just
marketplaces are some of the hardest businesses in the world to build, and let alone, consumer marketing is challenging no matter what category you work in. Consumer marketing in the context of a marketplace is like the creme de la creme, challenge, right? What's something that you believe about these businesses, specifically about the brands that are built around them, that maybe others might find contrary or contradictory? Is there some secret sauce or formula that you've tapped into that maybe might not be obvious to others? How do you think about how to run these businesses, especially from a consumer marketing perspective, successfully?
Yeah, look, they're all two-sided marketplaces that I've had. Just for context, I was at a early stage startup, the number 10 employee, I think, at a home services startup years ago, where we were bringing together home service providers like lawn care services and maid service and security systems with busy homeowners. Then I was at FTD, which is a flower and gifting delivery marketplace, and I was running the consumer division there before I went to Ticketmaster, where I was running the resale business and then the global marketplace. And so I think people would listen to all of those examples and say they're nothing like one another, but they have a lot of similarities. And one of the similarities is that they're all fee-based businesses. Another one is that they all rely on independent local networks of independent local suppliers, often with connectivity partners. And they also, in my case, dealt with perishable inventory. So they were all very much alike, and in many cases are very much alike the vacation rental market as well. So there were a couple of things that were really important. In a fee-based business, you have to have the capability to set fees appropriately. You have to give a fee to any consumer that's going to be attractive to them and acceptable to them. At the same time, too, you have to make sure that the fees or the commissions that you're charging to your supplier network are consistent with the value that you're providing them. And so in each of the roles I was in, particularly at Ticketmaster, we spent a lot of time and energy on revenue management, making sure that we were getting the fees that optimized profitability, but more than that, drove conversion. So that was super important. And on the supplier side, we also wanted to make sure that we'd set fees in a way that we would get access to the really good quality at good price points. So that was always important. I also spent a lot of my time with those networks of independent local suppliers. I really wanted to understand what was of value to them. I think a lot of people come into marketplaces and say, this is what the consumer wants. That's obviously really important. My Old Spice example was very much about what the consumer wants, but it's also equally important to provide value to the supply network. And in each of the roles I've been in, it's about understanding what was valuable to them and how we could service them with new tools or new technology or simply better service. And the last part is, perishable inventory has its own level of, complexity associated with it. In the flower business, those flowers have no value after Valentine's Day. In the ticketing business, right, if Beyonce has a tour and she had her event last night in town and you missed it, those tickets have absolutely no value anymore. And it's the same thing here with vacation rentals. If a night goes unoccupied, it's unoccupied. It's all perishable. So a lot of our focus is on, driving marketing, building out the right marketing campaigns to not only build our brand, but to drive transactions before that supply goes stale.
Very, very well said. And I think one of the things that gets talked about a lot in this industry, especially on the supplier front, and I'm glad you brought this up, is the fees, right? Is the quote-unquote OTA tax, as some folks in the industry would call it. I have strong opinions on, I not famously because this show isn't that famous, but folks who listen and folks who are in tune to the industry will remember me saying things like OTAs don't charge enough. And so I have really interesting, pretty convoluted perspective on this, to be honest. But I do think one thing that has been true, if you talk to enough VRMs in the industry, is that it feels like, we can argue if this is true or not, but it feels like the take from the OTA, the fees have become greater and greater over time, to the point, and the value associated with that booking or that guest maybe hasn't been directly, it hasn't grown in the same way that folks might expect with respect to value. And so what I'm getting at here is, how do you think about this like tension between in a two-sided marketplace between the consumer and the provider, the consumer and the supplier? What's the right way to go about increasing value when you increase costs and fees? And is there any, I guess, hot take that you have on how to appropriately distribute that cost so it doesn't feel to suppliers that it is as heavy and or as weighty as it actually is?
Yeah, so I'll unpack that a little bit here, and I'll start with the supplier side of it. This is the way I look at it, and I think we provide a great value to our supply network at Vrbo. And so just to start, right, we spend a lot of money, millions and millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, right, each year on marketing. And that helps educate travelers about vacation rentals. And it also brings them to our site or to our app where we provide visibility to all of our hosts' properties, right? So that's a very important value that we provide. In addition to that, we also invest millions and millions of dollars in improving the user experience for travelers so they have the information that they need so we can turn that browser into a booker. That is a massive investment we're making. And as a marketplace, we take all of the risk associated with that. And the only time that we charge the supplier, the only time we charge them is when there is a stay associated with that. So if we don't do a good job or the market's soft, we're paying all of that money out the door for marketing and for product experience improvements, but that supply network isn't paying anything.
Yeah.
Our preference, of course, is to continue to drive demand regularly and obviously collect those fees, but we only do it when a stay is successfully completed. And again, we're taking all the risk. I think that's a great model. Plus, if you have a property in a destination that isn't that popular, how are you really going to get eyes on it?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we think we do really well is we create inspiration for travelers. If a traveler says they want a lake vacation, they might know of 2 lakes nearby. They might not know of all the other options. And we provide those options to the travelers. They get to see them, and that creates great value for the property managers or for the hosts. So I think that's a very good value. And the commissions we charge, as far as I know, I've only been here for a year, but they haven't really increased. And on the same side, on the traveler side, we have fees that we charge them, our traveler service fee. And there is a lot of value that traveler gets in exchange for that, right? Our Book with Confidence guarantee is an example of something that we provide to travelers. We introduced it nearly a decade ago. Things go wrong in the industry, and we have the travelers back. If there's a cancellation, we take care of the traveler. We rebook the traveler, even if it costs more money than the initial booking. If their hot tub isn't working, like we take care of the traveler, whether it's a concession or we move them to another property. And that is a value in addition to the fact that we provide 24/7 service. You can access a real person. So that's value to the traveler. And as the business has progressed this year, at least since I've been at the business, I haven't seen those fees increase. If anything, we look at the buying patterns, the booking patterns from our travelers, and we modify our traveler service fees accordingly. And I've seen in many circumstances where we've also lowered those fees. We've already spent all that money in marketing. We've lowered those fees to drive a conversion, to drive a booking, which is ultimately a value back to the host or to the property manager. So I think the model works really well, and I think it will continue to work very well. Clearly, a lot of property managers go direct. That's understandable. I think I've been in businesses where that happens exactly in the flower business, for example. A lot of florists, they would drop off information about their floral shop, right? And that happens. But the reality, too, is that travelers may book a vacation one day in Hawaii, 1 week in Hawaii, and the next time it's in Scottsdale, and the next time it's in Breckenridge. And so, they rely on a marketplace to give them cues, signals of quality, and that's another value that Vrbo provides.
I want to talk a little bit about discovery because I think it's fair to say that Vrbo and Expedia Group more generally, owns a lot of travel search, a lot of travel discovery. As consumer search behavior changes, as we increasingly rely on agents like ChatGPT to help us find the right kind of place that we're looking for next week based off of our very, very long prompt in my case. How do you think that changes the discovery that Expedia and specifically Vrbo provides to travelers today, when choice is significantly limited, how does that affect the brand promise, the marketing promise that you were just talking about? Any thoughts on how consumer preference will evolve and what that might mean for the business?
Yeah, AI is clearly a disruptor, but it's also an enabler and I think an accelerant of much better experiences for travelers. So it's not the future. We're embracing it right now and utilizing it right now on Vrbo, for example. So maybe I'll just give you an example of what that experience might be like for a traveler. The majority of our trip planners are female, so I'll give you an example. Let's say someone named Rachel. She's coming to the site. She comes to Vrbo and she wants to take a vacation. So she puts in her dates. She puts in her destination. In this case, she wants to go to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. I've always wanted to go there. I live in Chicago. I've never been. And then she puts in details about her party. So let's say there's a dozen people, 6 kids, 6 adults, three families, right? So she gets all of these results back, hundreds and hundreds of results. And she's like, well, that's an awful lot. Let me add some additional information in. Let me put in the price ranges that make sense for me. And then let me put in the number of bedrooms I want and the number of beds that I want too, because travelers can filter for that on Vrbo. And then she gets back a more reasonable but pretty large number of properties because Vrbo has so many properties in the Upper Peninsula. Well, that's where AI starts to kick in, right? We use AI to improve the sort for that particular traveler, right? So we will take a look at Rachel's browsing behavior. We'll take a look at her previous purchase experience, her booking experience in the past. We might take a look at what like travelers have preferred, right? Like travelers being those who maybe are booking for, 3 different families, 6 kids, 6 adults. And we'll take into consideration what properties convert best, have the highest ratings, right? So that sort will take place powered by AI for Rachel. So she sees the best properties first.
Yeah.
So then Rachel goes through that. She's like, oh, that's, super interesting. I like some of these properties. Now maybe there's 8 to 10 I'm interested in. So how do I go from there? Well, our travelers love to utilize reviews to make decisions. While they respect what our hosts and property managers say about the properties, they want to hear what other travelers say about them. The only problem is there's a lot of reviews because over half of our travelers leave reviews. So that's a pretty significant number. So she's like, well, how do I absorb all of that review content? Well, that's where we use AI again to help her. We use AI to order the reviews that she sees. So maybe because she has a family, or multiple families in this case, it will prioritize the reviews that talk about, proximity to family destinations or events, or whether the properties have game rooms. If she were with, 11 other adults, it might be more about access, to nightlife, right? So AI powers the order of the reviews. And then if Rachel doesn't really want to go through and review all of that information, we also use AI to summarize the reviews for her so she at a glance can find out what travelers are saying about these Vrbo properties. Maybe it is access to the beach or, has a game room that's fun for the kids, or maybe it's spotless at check-in. Then she's, brings it down to maybe 2 or 3 properties and she wants to ask the host some questions. In the past, she'd go ask the host would respond to her, and back and forth and back and forth. So we saw that. It adds a little bit of challenge and complexity. And we added an AI property Q&A, right? So now if she has questions about parking or about Wi-Fi, she doesn't have to go to the host. She can collect that information more easily. And I think we've had over millions of travelers utilizing that property Q&A that's AI powered. That's an example of just how we're using it today.
Yeah.
And if you take that experience where we're really helping turn that browser into a booker with AI, you throw in 24/7 service, you throw in our Book with Confidence guarantee, that is a great value proposition for the traveler. That experience is phenomenal for the traveler. And that value prop, that experience, that is the brand.
Yeah.
Right? It's one thing to develop a brand campaign and utilize marketing to explain why you're great. Ultimately, the brand is the promise. It's the commitment that you make about the experience. That's what travelers are really looking for. And that's the brand that we're going to be delivering.
Very well said. I'd love to hear your thoughts too on that. Was a great example of once somebody's on the Vrbo site, right? But I think, Vrbo and certainly Expedia more generally has dominated SEO for for again, I think you would probably know the numbers much better than I do, but a significant number of search queries, travel related, Expedia, for lack of a better term, owns. As we see search behavior shift from traditional search engines, which feels weird to even call Google that, but you know what I'm getting at here, to more Gen AI experiences and choices significantly limited before I'm ever on the Vrbo website. What do you think of that? How do you think discovery happens in a non-10 link first page of Google SERPs reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right? We're at the earliest of the earliest stages here of knowing how it's going to evolve. I'm sure there'll still be a place for like the traditional search that you referenced, but certainly there are some early adopters of ChatGPT and Perplexity who are using them to search, and find, vacation rentals. And at an Expedia level, not specifically a Vrbo level, we have, engaging in conversations with all of those companies. We are making sure that we are in conversations with them as the concept of travel with AI evolves. And I'm sure many of our competitors are doing the same thing because we want to understand and pilot with them, what those experiences might look like.
Yeah.
My guess is and my sense is, travelers might begin their discovery process there, but it doesn't mean they're going to complete it there as well. You might be able to come to one of those sites and take a look and ask questions, have some queries about the types of properties that you're interested in, and you might get results back. Some might be Airbnb properties, some might be Vrbo properties, etc. And then you have, as a traveler, have to make decisions about which link that you click through.
Yeah.
Right? When I've gone through that process myself, ultimately I'm still clicking through a link, and then I'm continuing the process when I arrive on that platform, on that marketplace. And I think at least in the near term, that's how I expect that it will evolve. That there may be the initial discovery there, but then ultimately you come to a vacation rental marketplace like Vrbo, and then we introduce you to all these different ideas and concepts that you might not have even considered in the first place. And then you effectively begin your search anew. It's important, though, that if information comes from, let's say, a ChatGPT, so all the parameters that you set are provided, it'd be super helpful when you come back, right? Yeah. All of that information is provided. So if you continue the search on Vrbo, we have all of the information, and we don't make you provide all of that information again.
I was talking to your colleague, Greg, about this a little while ago, and I think that there's travel as a sector plays just kind of an interesting role right now in that, yes, I've been using ChatGPT in particular to help me figure out the hotel I'm going to book in the next city I'm traveling to. And I might get a couple of results that do match, pretty well the prompts that I gave it. But then part of me is like, well, what are all the ones like I'm not seeing, right? And I think with travel in particular, yes, we want curation. I think most consumers do. But we also want the freedom and the flexibility to understand what else might be true if I had shifted the prompt only slightly. It's kind of like filtering, right? In one of my challenges with OTAs more generally as a consumer has been like, if you're the upper end of your price range is $500 a night, but then there's the perfect property for $505, right? I might never see that property depending on how they run their search, and they're filtering more specifically. So it is interesting, and I think for the consumer, the real value lies in being able to have Vrbo understand all of the dialogue that I just had with ChatGPT, all of my reprompting, right, and be able to take that into consideration once I leave ChatGPT and hop on to the Vrbo site. That's where I think the real magic from a consumer perspective really begins. Because you'll have all that context. Are we far out from that, do you think?
I mean, I think that'll happen, right? And I think travelers will then come to the site and all of that information will be passed. But look, one of the things we see in vacation rentals is, you're planning for a group, right? And so it's not like maybe conventional lodging like a hotel. I'm making the decision for myself. One of the things we've noticed is that when people are planning their trips, they also want to reach out to their friends, reach out to their family. So they're not just moving immediately from the search into the booking. That process can take a while. It can take, hours of their time. We even have tools that allow our trip planners to reach out to friends who they can then look at the properties and then provide feedback back to them, which means that, in fact, at that point, they might be changing some of those filters. They might be changing some of their plans as well. So I would expect that when travelers come to Vrbo, we would take the information from, let's say, a ChatGPT, we'd incorporate that, but we'd also be providing that traveler with the opportunity to look at other considerations, other types of properties. People don't want to miss out on something really good, and they want to make sure, especially as a trip planner, that they're providing a great experience for their friends and their family. I do think, to your point, though, that it's very filter heavy, and I'm sure that over time, and maybe not in the very distant future, but in like the nearer term, but not immediately, that platforms, marketplaces will make it easier for travelers to say in their own words what they're looking for. So my family travels. We might say, hey, we're looking for between these two price points, but I want to make sure that we are proximate to the beach. I also want to make sure that we're near a game room. I want this many beds, this many bedrooms, and oh, by the way, I want this, this, and this. Like, to filter for all of those things could be super complicated. It's much easier to tell a marketplace like Vrbo all of that information and have it then provide the right results back to me, sorted based upon the criteria that I had mentioned earlier. And then from there, if I want to make different requests and have different prompts, it absorbs it, keeps it. And if I come back, a few days later, that information is still there, and I can continue my search.
Yeah. I can't wait for that to be reality. It's going to be wildly exciting. Search, right, still requires an initial awareness that I want to go do something, right? I want to plan a trip. I want to take this particular flight on these particular dates. So much of travel discovery is happening on social today. I'm scrolling through TikTok, scrolling through Instagram, and I'm stumbling upon a beautiful reel of this incredible vacation home, and I'm like, where is this? Oh, and it's in Italy. I have to stay here, right? And I go and I figure out the Vrbo link, and I go and I book my stay, right? Now, it doesn't always happen that quickly. I think you would like it to do. I think we'd all like it to. How do you think about the role that a platform like Vrbo plays in social discovery, especially if just, who knows what's going to happen, but if traditional search, as we've described it, wanes, the need to provide more demand, the need to provide more opportunities for, in the same way that 5-10 years ago you could post your home on Vrbo and the next day you could get a booking and it was magical. It's much harder, right? To do that today. But social still, I think, is an interesting frontier for hospitality, and especially for the vacation rental world. How do you see that playing a role in sort of Expedia's strategy, or more specifically Vrbo's strategy?
Yeah, there'll still be a role for search, but I think of search as capturing demand, and I think what you're asking about is generating demand.
Yes.
And there's still plenty of travelers who aren't familiar with vacation rentals, so we have an opportunity in the industry to make them familiar with it and more comfortable with it as well. So I think paid social is where more of our dollars are going, and I expect that will continue into the future. And it's not just advertising with the same kind of traditional advertising and a dynamic banner ad or something like that. And it's not just simply showing like a beautiful property. We do that. A lot of other brands do that as well. And that certainly engages travelers and gets them interested in the property and potentially in the marketplace. I think what we're seeing is a move towards more influencers, right? Influencers that we work with, they can create content about their stays. In the past, they might have produced that and it would be published organically. And I think what you'll see now is us taking that type of content and also pushing it into paid social channels as well. I think that isn't just about discovery for potentially booking for months and weeks out. I think what we're also seeing is that type of influencer-led paid social can drive transactions relatively quickly as well. We think it can be a really efficient way to reach travelers and to drive bookings for all of our hosts and property managers. So I would agree with you. That's definitely a place that we're investing more, and the returns are very good in that today.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in the space who they find the term influencer a little offensive. They prefer to be called creators now. But folks who've been built very successful businesses for themselves, documenting the cool experiences and stays that they've been able to take. Most of them are obviously photographers and videographers, but I've always been surprised that we haven't seen a large at scale adoption of some sort of creator program at the OTA level. I think Airbnb experimented with it for a little bit, but then sunsetted the program. But it seems, I should say, to me that's kind of the next frontier in terms of adding value to suppliers too, right? Having a marketplace of creators that I can invite to come and stay at my home on a Monday night when no one's using it anyways, right? And help create content for me. How do you think that plays out from a provider's perspective, from a supplier's perspective? Does Vrbo have a vested interest in sort of, Zach's Vacation Rental Homes building its own brand on social? Does that make sense for Vrbo? How do you think through that?
Yeah, well, first of all, the influencers or the creators, I guess, like they are. We talked about brand building beforehand. They are their own brands, right? And a lot of travelers have confidence in them. They trust them, and word of mouth works for a lot of businesses, but it's not very often you'll find someone who stayed in a particular property, right? So when you have someone, a creator who you respect, who you trust, making an endorsement, it's really valuable, and I would expect that would. That's why we're going to see some more value, I think, from Vrbo by investing more in that type of marketing. It's an interesting question about how that helps the individual provider with their individual property. I don't think we're quite ready to do that at scale where we can do it for each and any of those properties, though it's an interesting question that I'll take away after this session. But what I would say is, look, I can appreciate the fact that certain property owners, particularly property managers, are looking to build their own brands. I would expect that they would continue to invest not just in paid search, for example, but also invest in paid social as well as they try to build their own business and their own brands. From a OTA's perspective, from a marketplace's perspective, though, one of the things that we provide is substantial amounts of supply at scale. So those property managers may work across certain parts of a country, for example, whether it's in the U.S. or outside the United States, of course, in the markets that we're in. And I would expect there that travelers might seek them out for those particular locations, but will ultimately come back to to a marketplace, especially when they are considering a different vacation destination, a different location.
This is unsolicited marketing advice. Not that you need this from me, but I do think there's an incredible opportunity to build that sort of like matchmaking service between creators and providers, just because there's a lot of need from the provider's perspective for this type of content. And quite frankly, the value of UGC content isn't new. It's been talked about for years now, but I think UGC specifically in vacation rentals is still new. I think we're at the beginning stage here too, with respect to it, the potential that it could bring. I want to get your thoughts on pricing, specifically dynamic pricing. You know revenue management really well, given your past experiences. There's all this talk about what AI will do to pricing. If ChatGPT knows, based off of everything I've shared with it, everything I've prompted it so far, that I'm a luxury consumer, right? I might be willing to pay more than a first-time traveler to a destination, to a place. Should that change? Should I see a different price than you, Larry? Airlines have been doing this for forever, right? Like, how do you think about the conversation with respect to dynamic pricing, but at a very personalized level, based off of intimate, if you will, details that I might have shared with my AI agent?
Yeah, I'm hard pressed to believe that dynamic pricing will move to that level, even if it can move there. I doubt that it will. I mean, it responds today to general supply and demand dynamics. That makes a lot of sense. We can adjust fees, even though generally we don't move them very much. But clearly, the property managers or the hosts can move their prices up and down based upon how compressed a particular period is in the market. And that makes a lot of sense for them to do that. But I don't think it's going to get down to the personalized level. I just haven't seen that evolve in any other industries. I think there'd be pretty significant consumer backlash against that. And I also think there'd probably be regulatory backlash against, providing personal information and having then my own individual personalized price. Now, there's different sets of circumstances as well. So, for example, we have our One Key loyalty program,
Yep.
and their members get the best prices. So we know something about you, but by knowing something about you, by virtue of that, we just give you a lower price. So I think that could happen, but this notion of increasing prices because someone, an individual, has a higher capacity to pay, I really doubt any industry is going to move quickly, if ever, in that direction.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, how it plays out, because you could argue from a technical perspective, it hasn't quite been doable at scale until now. But yes, I'm with you. I think that there's a lot of hurdles before anything like that would become a reality. On the One Key front, do hosts and or operators, do they take an additional hit on that? Is that a cost that Expedia / Vrbo covers? If I'm a 1K, if One Key member myself, and I want to go and earn points, redeem my cash rather on a stay, how do those economics work out?
Yeah, that's funded by Vrbo.
Okay.
So it's at our cost, and the property managers, the hosts, the individual hosts, they don't have any accountability or responsibility for those costs. It's really just a benefit for them. One of the things right now is most of that One Key cash is eligible to be used on the properties for the individual hosts.
Yeah.
A lot of the property managers don't have that benefit because we at Vrbo would have to be merchant of record.
Yep.
And we're not for them, at least at this point. We're building that capability. And so they might not get the benefit. So those individual hosts will get the benefit of travelers picking out their properties where they could use their One Key cash. We launched a promotion suite as well recently. So last minute promotions, early booking promotions, mobile promotions, and you can stack many of those promotions with the One Key as well, which creates a very nice and attractive offer for our travelers. Now, there is one exception to that. We are now giving our suppliers the opportunity to create special discounts for One Key members. In that particular case, they would in fact fund that. But to date, everything that we've enabled so far has been funded by Vrbo.
That's amazing. I think it's going to be wildly exciting to see over the next few years how loyalty in particular does help move the needle for these businesses. I mean, to date, you guys from an OTA perspective anyways are the only ones with this sort of loyalty program that is a clear differentiator and value add from a professional operator's perspective as well. Once that's unlocked, that'll be very, very exciting for folks who do choose that option. My last couple questions for you, Larry, really revolve around the Vrbo brand. You obviously care a lot about brand. You've been successful at moving brands that were lower down on the totem pole up in terms of consumer awareness and consumer adoption. I think it's fair to say from a consumer perspective, the category leader in the space is Airbnb. They've done an exceptional job at building consumer awareness. They have a very, very strong brand. This isn't news to anyone. As somebody who's always cheered for the underdogs and been successful at turning those underdogs around in professional contexts like Old Spice, what are you excited about with respect to building the Vrbo brand? What's next for the Vrbo brand? I know you can't share tons, but give us a little bit of just a teaser, if you will, on what you're most excited about with the work that you're doing right now.
Okay, so there's two things I'll talk about. The first is about diversifying trip types. A lot of travelers view Vrbo as the place to go for that week-long summer vacation, by the beach, big properties, lots of families. We can handle 10 people, 12 people, 15 people. That's great. We love those properties. We love booking those properties. It's great that we have such a phenomenal market share for those properties. But the reality is Vrbo offers a lot more than that. And one of the things that we have to do as we build our marketing and build our brand is remind travelers or inform travelers that they could use Vrbo for lots of different types of trips. That means they could use us for not just those big beach vacations, but for ski vacations at mountain destinations. Or if they're looking for a vacation in an urban market, well, we have condominiums and apartments. We have lots of different property types, lots of different property sizes, and also lots of different price points. One of the things travelers usually tell us is they come to us for a really big expensive vacation, but they don't think of us for a less expensive weekend trip. And so we have the supply, we have the product, we have to do a better job marketing and building our brand there so that our travelers stay with us and don't go outside the relationship for other types of trips. So that's important. We've already started to do that work, and we're already starting to see some benefits in that for shorter stays. A lot of our travelers will stay for a week plus, and we're seeing a lot of success with those shorter weekend stays. But I think the bigger opportunity for us, the real way to differentiate us, is based around quality. We've done an extensive amount of research over the past year, and one of the things travelers have told us is they want a consistent, reliable VR experience with really good standards, with high standards. They want a stay that's stress-free, and they want to be able to book with confidence. What they've also told us is that the category sometimes lets them down and doesn't meet their expectations. And so where Vrbo needs to focus and where we're going to focus is becoming the marketplace, the most trusted, highest quality marketplace for vacation rentals. Again, no one is owning that in the category today. This is generally white space, and so we're going to double down in this area. So for example, one of the things we're going to do is start rewarding hosts who provide the best experience for their guests with higher and higher visibility. For example, we're creating new badges and benefits for our top performing properties. We're also purging properties that don't meet travelers' expectations or our expectations. And it's not something we're doing just once. We're going to continue to do it repeatedly to ensure that we have the right properties on our platform. So it's not just about getting a booking, it's about getting a great stay. That's super important. In addition to that, I mentioned beforehand our Book with Confidence guarantee. We're going to expand eligibility for that, market it more aggressively, and also spend more time letting travelers know about the 24/7 service that we provide, including the fact that you can reach a real person to help you when you have an issue. So all of those things and more that we'll be able to share over time are about delivering better quality experiences for our travelers. We'll do that in collaboration with our supply partners. We will certainly make sure that they're comfortable with the changes that we're making. But for sure, we're going to double down on creating better experiences for travelers. I talked to you earlier about the types of things that are noticeable to consumers, the unmet needs in the category. This is one of those places and spaces where there's an unmet need, and we're going to go fill it. And that's one of the ways that we're going to differentiate ourselves too.
I think that's amazing. I think a lot of the folks who are listening to this conversation who fall into the professional category, as the industry would call it, are going to be quite delighted to hear that. They've been pushing for these standards for years. It's, there's standards in the hotel world, right? Especially if you're a branded hotel. If you want to stay at that brand level, there are expectations that you have to meet. If you don't meet those over a course of time, you're kicked out of the brand, right? If not the flag itself. And that's been missing from this space for a while. A quick follow-up, and we could talk about this, ad nauseum, but are you thinking of like a tiered approach? Are you thinking of, for lack of a better term, good, greater, great, or good, great, greater? Like, or are you just thinking like, no, these will just be kind of the flat Vrbo standards, and that'll exist if you want to list on the platform at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll always be standards for listing on the platform, and sometimes you have great expectations for a property and that hosts might not deliver, and then you have to remove them. But I think we think of it this way. There are certain badges of quality, like we have a Premier Host program today, right? We can always make those requirements stricter, more stringent, right? So that a traveler will only see a property that has a special badge if it really meets some very restrictive criteria, right? So those are the best of the best properties, and if you stay in one of those properties, you're going to have a good experience. Then we might not have a badge for all the other properties, but we still can evaluate them and assess them based upon traveler ratings, based upon cancellation rates, how often they accept a booking request or don't, host responsiveness scores, cleanliness scores. We can still rate them. And I mentioned beforehand about a sort and how we can present the properties in sort order. These are properties that might meet our criteria, but some do a better job than others. And so our sort might very well reflect what their performance is like. And so the higher your quality is, the more visibility you'll get. And the lower your quality is, even if it's above our standards, our minimum standards, the lower the visibility you'll get is. So I think that's a way for us to ensure or help ensure that our travelers get the best experiences. But no matter what, we'll always provide the right content on the site for a traveler to make a decision.
Yep.
So if a property meets our criteria, but sometimes it doesn't do great on host responsiveness, well, that's something travelers will be able to observe and see very clearly. We'll do a better job making that clear, and they can make their own decisions from there as well.
My last question for you, Larry, is you've been at Vrbo for a year now. For this next year, looking ahead, it's September 2025 right now. By September 2026, what are one or two things that you really hope Vrbo is known for in the broader consumer travel ecosystem? Are there adjectives that you hope that travelers will use when describing Vrbo a year from now? And if not adjectives, just what's the sentiment that you hope people will adopt when they think about Vrbo a year from now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, not in the context of what we want to say about Vrbo, but what rather travelers will say about us, because that's what's most important. If a traveler's talking to a friend, right, what are they going to say about Vrbo? Certainly, I would expect them to say, and based upon the conversation we just had, it should be obvious, that I want them to say that Vrbo is really a trusted marketplace. It's a high-quality marketplace. I went there. I found great supply. It was easy for me to digest all of the supply because it took all of that supply and gave me a reasonable set of options based upon my needs, answered all the questions I needed to be confident when booking, and then from there I had a great stay. And to the extent that I had any issues whatsoever, I called Vrbo, I went online, reached out to Vrbo, and they took care of me and they had my back. So I want them to think of us as the trusted marketplace, the highest quality marketplace, and one that has supply to meet all of their needs. That's number one. The second thing I'd like them to be able to say is, I used to go to Vrbo for my big trip every year, and now I'm going to go away for a weekend, not with 12 people, but with just my immediate family, just the four of us, and we booked a Vrbo for that too. And then, I had a golf trip with a few of my buddies as well. And, some of them didn't want to pay as much money, so I found a really great price point. It's very different than that really expensive property I got with my family, but I was able to find that on Vrbo too. That's what I'd like for them to play back about Vrbo, and I think if they play that back, we know that we'll have been very successful over the next year.
I lied. I have one more question. Same question, but for your supply partners. So for the professional operators, the independent hosts, what do you hope they say about the Vrbo brand a year from now?
Yeah, so hopefully they're saying, and we're certainly working on this, that we help fill their calendars. That's of paramount importance to all of them, that we're constantly driving demand to them regardless of their destination, their property type, their property size, their price point. We made their jobs easier as well by doing so. We gave them the tools and the APIs to enable them to run their business more efficiently. With our sister brand Expedia and with our B2B partnerships, that we were able to expand their distribution, which also helps them fill their calendar nights. I'd like to hear them say that, and I bet they will say that. I think there's two other things that would be super cool for them to hear from them. One is that we gave them more ways to make their properties visible. Our promotion suite enables them to add visibility, to create more visibility for themselves. Our Premier Host program enables them to provide more visibility. I'd like to be able to add more advertising solutions in the future that they can invest in to make their properties more visible to travelers. And I think the other thing I'd like them to say, which I know they would even say today, so I'm sure they'll be able to say it a year from now, is that Vrbo brings them the best guests, the ones who treat their properties like they treat their own homes. It's one thing to maximize income. It's another to minimize risk. And that's one of the things we do with Vrbo. We bring those travelers in with great care to make sure they have great stays, and that our property owners, our homeowners, feel confident when they have someone else staying in their homes.
Very well said, good sir. Thank you, Larry, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Best of luck to you and the team in this next year, and can't wait to interview some Vrbo customers and partners a year from now and see if they say the things, hopefully they will, I'm sure they will, that you just said today.
Well, thank you very much. My first podcast, right? So
you
thanks for
nailed
making
it, man.
it so easy.
You nailed it. Of course, man. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays or send me an email at zach@journey.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@journey.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at journey.com/alliance. Again, that's journey.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.